Good evening, everyone. Nice to have you. Thank you for joining us this evening. We have a very special evening in store for you. A conversation with Rabbi Leo Dee that I think probably every single one of you here in this room at least knows his name and probably his face, and hopefully his story. We'll find out a little bit more about that this evening. We're very fortunate to be able to have Rabbi Dee in our community. He actually arrived from Israel this morning. So if you fall asleep, that's not good. If he does, it's understandable. And he's already spoken in 2 other places today, so we are, Baruch Hashem, his 3rd stop. And we're very grateful to have him here. I want to express our hakaras hatov to Rabbi Genak, who was instrumental in bringing Rabbi Dee here. Rabbi Genak, thank you. And of course, a very special thank you to our men's club and sisterhood who are sponsoring this program this evening. We are, of course, always grateful for your support. Okay. So welcome, Rabbi Dee. Nice to have you with us.
Thank you.
You're looking very Israeli as opposed to this American rabbi. I hope in Yirtzeh Hashem one day to look like you, but I hope you never have to look like me. So that's a good thing. Rabbi Dee, you currently live in Efrat, but you didn't start out in Efrat. You started out in London, I believe, many years ago. And the journey has been a bit of an interesting journey. Can you share with us a little bit about that journey?
Right. So both I and my wife Lucy were Baal Teshuvah, and we had our own sort of different journeys to traditional Yiddishkeit, let's say. We were brought up in more Masorti type homes. And we met actually at Oxford, JSOC. Lucy was studying at Oxford, I'd studied at Cambridge, I already left. And I went to visit a friend of mine who was doing a PhD there. It was Tikkun Leil Shavuot. And she had organized the learning program for the night, which basically she'd asked the Chabad rabbi there to speak for 5 slots, 6 slots in a row. He called her 2 hours before he left to say that he had a better offer in London. And so she was left with no plan for the whole Tikkun Leil Shavuot. So she asked her friends each to do an hour slot. But she was worried because she thought they only had enough content for 20 minutes. And then after the first 20 minutes, then there'd be like a silence, everyone would go home, and that would be the end of it. Apparently, she remembered that I turned up, and at the end of these 20 minutes, I asked a load of questions, and then it went on, it slept on until the end of the hour, until it was time for Ben Jerry's, and then the next slot.
You did that 5 times?
I did 5 times, apparently. So in any case, the next day, we played cards, I remember, in my friend's room, and I went home from that experience, and I said to my grandmother, in London, I met the girl I'm going to marry, and she was in Japan for a year because she was studying Japanese. She came back, we started going out. 6 months later, we were engaged, and 6 months later, when she graduated, we were married. We had 2 girls, Mara and Karen, and then I was working in private equity. I was promoted to director. And the next day, I quit. And we went off to Israel for 4 years to study, to be a rabbi. And if you'd have asked me, 2 years ago, why did you make that change? I would have had this amazing story about how I saw the light and how I would this great sort of awakening. But what happened was, June the 11th, after the tragedy, it was Lucy's birthday. So we invited a number of her friends to sit around and talk. And when I asked the question, what did Lucy mean to you? And every single one of them said, she saw the spark of light in our souls, and she encouraged us to bring it out. And then it suddenly clicked. that it wasn't me who had decided to quit from being an investor and become a rabbi. It was her who had seen the potential and said, don't waste your time in being a banker. And so it took till that moment to realize.
It's always the women.
That's what it always been.
Always the women. Yeah. Behind every great man is an even greater woman. Yeah. That's the case. April 7th, 2023 was the first day of Chol Hamoed Sukkot in Israel. 20, I'm sorry. First day of Chol Hamoed Pesach. Thank you. First day of Chol Hamoed Pesach in Israel. It was still Yom Tov for us here, and your family decided to take a trip. That was the day when your wife, your two daughters, Zichronam Livracha, were killed. Can you tell us what happened on that day, and how has your life changed as a result of it?
We set out in the morning in 2 cars. I was with Tali and Yehuda, and my daughter Karen was in Jerusalem for the Shabbat. Lucy was with Maya, who was 20, and Rena, who was 15. We were neck and neck up the 90 highway up to Tiberia. Waze directed us both left, Derech Hamra, Tzolek Hamra, which is a longer route, but sometimes there's less traffic. And I had in my head, because every time we'd previously gone in a car together, Lucy always said, continue straight up. And even if it takes longer, it's less stressful to go straight up. So I changed ways to go straight, and she took a left. And half an hour later, I got a call from my sister, who's in a taxi with my parents, just half an hour behind us. And she said, the taxi driver says there's been a terror attack on the road. Are you okay? So I said, we're okay, but I'll call Lucy. And I called Lucy, there was no response. I called Maya, there was no response. I called Rena, there was no response. And then I looked at Google Family Link, and I saw they were at Summit Hamra. So I immediately turned the car around, and on the way, my son Yehuda saw a telegram, a photograph of the car that had been hit. It was our car with our swim bag on the back seat, and we sort of understood the worst. So that was that. We got there. They wouldn't let me see the bodies to identify them. But they gave me Maya's ID card, so we knew that the worst had happened. And they told us that Lucy had been airlifted to Hadassah and Karen. So I immediately sort of zoomed down to Hadassah and Karen. And then she had an operation to remove 2 bullets, which did not succeed. And we ended up burying my 2 daughters on the Sunday and Lucy on the Tuesday.
I think that all of us today, hearing this story from you, are in as much shock now as we were when we heard the story originally, trying to process, wrap our heads around how such a thing could happen. But you had to live through it. You went from Chol Hamoed Pesach to having to bury your 2 daughters. And then to Chol Hamoed Pesach again with the hope that maybe Lucy would recover, and then you had to bury her. And then to Chol Hamoed Pesach, and then to Shvi Shel Pesach, and then to Shiva. How does any one person manage that up and down roller coaster emotions that you had to go through? What did you learn from it, if anything, and what can we learn from it?
I sensed that there was something very unusual about that whole process, and I don't imagine there were many people in history, during history, who had to go through that sort of cycle quite in that way. And I was asking people at the Shiva, it was on my mind. It was like the first 2 people came to the Shiva. I was saying, why did this happen this way? Why was it up and it was down? What was Hashem's message? And I think maybe some people tried to answer until Benny Gantz turned up, and he sat opposite me, and I said to him, this is what happened. Well, what do you think it means? He said, I'll tell you what it means. He said, it means Hashem is telling them that your life from now on is going to be happy and sad together. And I looked at him and I said, you know what? I said, you're absolutely right. I said, thank you, Rabbi Benny. So he said, what do you mean, Rabbi Benny? I said, well, somebody teaches you one Torah, is your Rav. So I said, you're Rabbi Benny. And that was true. What happened after that, I was actually happy and sad. I'm probably still happy and sad. In fact, on Tisha B'Av, on Tisha B'Av, they have a strange sport in Israel, which is to invite the saddest person in the country onto national television and ask them one question: how do you feel? So that's what they do on Tisha B'Av in Israel. Apparently, I don't have a TV, so I didn't even know. At the time, I didn't even know which channel was left wing and which was right wing, and what the audience was. Anyway, they explained it to me. So I turned up, and they asked me, so Rabbi, how do you feel? And I said, happy and sad. I said, I feel sad about the past, I feel hopeful about the future. And I said, I can tell you something I didn't understand before. See, on Tisha B'Av, it's a moed, it's called a moed, and we don't put on tefillin, and we don't say tachlim. So it's got three features which are like chol moed, which is a happy day. It's the saddest day of the calendar. How can it be? This is a famous question. I said, I never had a satisfying answer. I said, now I can tell you the answer. I can tell you pshat. If you've had a tragedy which is so severe that there's really nothing, no words can describe it, I said, you know for sure tomorrow will be a better day. I said, I know for sure that every day from now on will be better than that day. I said, if you haven't been through that, then Baruch Hashem, you don't know, something could happen. But nothing could happen to me now. So I said, that gives me greater hope than anyone else. And I say hope and not optimism because Rav Sachs used to say that the difference between optimism and hope is that optimism is believing things will get better, and hope is doing something to make them better. And so the hope is the Jewish approach.
It's a great lesson, painfully learned, but a great lesson. So it's been a little bit more than a year. I think you marked the year by dedicating a special hall or room in Efrat in memory of your wife and your daughters. It's been more than a year, hard to believe. During that time, were you ever angry at God? And if you were, how did you deal with that?
So the two aspects of that question. So first was the anger side. I'm not somebody who gets very angry. And I realized, actually going back to this idea of happy and sad, that being happy and sad at the same time was a sort of contradiction, because in English, the opposite to happy is unhappy, which is sad. But in Hebrew, if you think about it, it's not the same thing, right? Sameach and atzuv are two separate words. And I thought to myself, it's very odd how I can be, if sad is the opposite to happy, how can I be happy and sad at the same time? And then I thought to myself, the mitzvah gadol liot b'simcha tamid, right? It's a mitzvah to always be happy. And yet we know it's also a mitzvah to be sad occasionally as well, right? It's Tish B'Av or Tilabaya. So how can the Chazal have told us to be happy and sad at the same time? If they're opposites, then I thought to myself, what is the one midah which is forbidden to be ever? Right? Kaas and anger. It's forbidden ever, according to the Rambam, to ever be angry. So if it's a mitzvah to always be happy, and it's forbidden to ever be angry, maybe the opposite to happy is angry. And it was this was my sort of theory, and it seemed to confirm itself because there were a number of people I was broigers with before this tragedy. So after about 10 years of being in Israel this time, 4 or 5 people who, for whatever reason, probably my fault, but sometimes their fault, if I saw them in the street, I would walk to the other side, or they would walk to the other side, or if I was in the supermarket buying oranges, they would buy, if they were buying oranges, I would buy carrots, and they would swap over, and I'd try not to make eye contact. There was just whatever reason, the people that, whatever. When it came to the Shiva, every single one of them turned up, and all they wanted was a hug. And all I wanted from them was a hug. And when I thought about it, I realized that I had so little capacity, so little level of happiness, that I had no capacity for this anger. And just beginning to release that, that feeling of anger was tremendous relief for me, and actually elevated me. So I learned something sort of important from that. But that's half your question. The other question, the other question was about Hashem. The way I look at it is that it depends how you define Hashem. I read very good books by Rabbi David Aaron, who's a Kabbalist in the Old City. And one thing he says is that generally speaking, he says we have subject and object. Normally, I am holding the cup, I am the subject, the cup is the object. I sitting on the chair, I am the subject, and the chair is the object. And generally speaking, I'm always the subject, right? He said, except for one exception, which is when I'm talking about Hashem. When I'm talking about Hashem, Hashem is always the subject, and I can only be the object. So therefore, to say, I believe in Hashem, I'm angry with it, it doesn't work, because it's just grammatically incorrect, because Hashem is always the subject. So how do we understand that? And he brings a Rav Kook, and he says, if you dream about someone, how much do you know about the person in your dream? And he said, maybe everything. How much does the person in your dream know about you? Nothing. So Hashem, we are in Hashem's dream. Hashem knows pretty much everything about us, and we know nothing about him, or something about him. Rav Sachs used to say, don't worry if you don't believe in Hashem. He says, worry if Hashem stops believing in you. So, I don't know if that answers the question, but our relationship with Hashem is such that it doesn't matter how I feel about Hashem. It matters how he feels about me.
It's inspiring for us to hear that. I think we've all, at certain points in our lives, grappled with that, with perhaps the anger or not the anger, and it's inspiring for us to hear how you grappled with it, and I am sure continue to grapple with it. It's not something that goes away.
Other things happen. For example, often things happen to me over the last year which inspired me, which seemed to be by chance, but were not by chance. So I switched on a shir from Michal Horowitz from Woodmere right at the beginning, and I was really struggling with some of these ideas. And she was talking, I think she talks to groups of ladies, I imagine around 50s, 60s, I don't know who she speaks to. And she was talking about Im Eina Mili Mili, if I'm not for myself, who is for me? And her interpretation was, everybody has a specific tafkid, task in life, and if I don't do my task, who will do it? That was her whole share. And then she turned to the audience, I'm imagining these ladies, and she said, we think that our task in life is to get to 120 and have our grandchildren, or great-grandchildren sitting on our lap. She said that that's the task for all of us, for every lady. Some people have different tasks, Hashem said. And when she said that, it spoke straight to my heart, because it wasn't the role for my wife, it wasn't the role for my daughters. And in a sense it inspired me. People asked me, what if you left 20 minutes later on the day of the tragedy? What happens if you'd never made Aliyah? Have you ever thought about what if? And I always say to them, I said, you can't ask what if, right? Because it just doesn't help, it doesn't achieve anything. said, except for one motive. I said, what if Hashem knows better than I do? And the thought that, what if Hashem planned this from the start? That I had these expectations. I'd be married to my Beshed for 60, 70 years, and I'd have Maya and Rina's kids on my lap. But what if Hashem had planned this somehow from the beginning? That was always the plan. So, what if? What if?
Well, I believe that Lucy was 48 when she passed away. Maya was 20, and Rena was 16. 15. And Lucy, in her short time here in this world, as well as the girls, inspired and did a lot of chesed. But since they've been gone, the chesed has multiplied many, many times. Can you tell us how all that chesed impacts on you? And what are some of the initiatives that are going on in their memory?
So, Lucy, I said we're building two halls in a frat, actually, in her memory. She was very much, wants to bring community together the whole time. She was very much engaged in women's learning, and a number of women's learning groups have started up and have strengthened. And strangely enough, one lady told me in El-Azhar, which is a nearby town, that she'd been trying to start a women's learning weekly shir for years, and every time she started it hadn't sort of taken. And when this tragedy happened, she said she started immediately for memory of Lucy, and they get 50 women every week, and it's just continued. A year later, they asked me to come and talk to them, and they were still going strong. So somehow she's inspired that, and in a frat, a number of different projects. There's, I have to say, almost all of it happens without my input, which is incredible. That's people in a frat and elsewhere have just taken upon themselves projects and said, do you mind if we do it in memory of Lucy or Maya or Rena? And I've said, with pleasure. We've had Haggadah written, we've had a Megillah root with commentary written, we've had a Slichot booklet, we just had an Omer booklet written, printed and distributed around Israel. There's a learning program that goes on for Maya, which is Pirkei Avot, which I think is quite popular in America, and is translated into 10 languages. Rena was the girl at school who, if there was a girl in the class who had no friends, she would be the one with her arm around her. If there was a girl who wasn't invited to a ball game, she was the one who would start up another ball game for her. So her friends created a beautiful little pergola with seating outside the school where the girls could sit at lunchtime and chat together. And they started an after-school activity, a ball game, which is for all the girls. And they're arranging a hike to Masada for hundreds of girls around the country. And Baruch Hashem, it keeps going on. In fact, in 3 weeks' time I get back, they're dedicating a Sefer Torah to all 3 girls. 2 rabbis took it upon themselves. One is a scribe. He spent the whole year going around. Every letter is written by a different kid. So they hold his hand. 300,000 around Israel and Chalim. And then there's going to be a the Sefer Torah in a frat. 4,000 kids are going to be there, and some singers and whatever. But it's just people have just opened their hearts and helped us.
Does it amaze you?
It amazes me, and it warms my heart as well. But it's a strange thing. At the beginning, a lot of people recognized me in the street, and sometimes it was a bit embarrassing, when you're not used to it, the people coming up to you and hugging you. And now I actually find it I find it very calming. I find that sometimes I'm feeling, down. I'm walking on the street and somebody will come up to me and say, Rabbi Dee, and give me a hug or shake my hand. And actually, I feel like it's almost from HaKadosh Baruch Hu that Hashem is coming to give me a hug. So.
You could have chosen to sort of just disappear into the background, to be more muted, but I remember, I don't remember which Levaya it was, but you stood up there and you spoke to the world. You didn't just speak to the people who were right there. You literally spoke to the entire Jewish world, and I think you were probably speaking to the entire world. You chose to put yourself in that position. Is that something that you regret ever doing?
What happened was, after the girls' Levaya on the Sunday night, I had like just a strange thought that I wanted to speak to the Jewish world at the time, and I wrote some notes down about my thoughts, and then I went back to sleep. And then the Monday morning, I called Leo Dee, who was the mayor of Efrat, and I said, can you call an international press conference in Efrat? Which he did, and it wasn't obvious that they would come, and they did. And I made a speech about how there's evil in the world, and there's good, and killing innocent women is evil, and my wife and my girls were a picture of goodness. And if you support good over evil, will you please display an Israeli flag on your social media? And many people took that up, and it went viral. And so I think, strangely, given what happened on the 7th of October, which was exactly 6 months later, the message still stands. That actually there's good and there's evil, and the world has to realize that there are just things which are unacceptable and have to be wiped out.
So maybe we can transition a little bit from the personal to Israel. You just arrived this morning, spent Yom HaZikaron and Yom HaAtzmaut in Israel. I'm assuming that both of those days were different this year than they normally are. Can you tell us a little bit about how you found them to be different? What's the mood in the country? What's changed?
I'm probably the least qualified to tell you what was different this year to last year, because last year I realized that we were not present. Obviously, it was just a week after the Shiva, and I have no recollection really of last year. This year, I think Yom HaAtzmaut was very much quieter. There weren't some parties. There was Tekkesim ceremonies. People had barbecues, but it wasn't lively. Yom HaZikaron, we had a ceremony in Kfar Etzion. In Kfar Etzion, they have a section for soldiers. I remember last year there were probably 3 graves there. They're now 12. Just filled up, and they're all 20-year-old boys. So where we were sitting last year, I do remember there was a few families. It was 3 times as many families this year. So it's very different. Then of course all friends come, and I have to say I chose, and the kids chose, not to go down to the grave on Yom HaZikaron. Because we just had the Shabbat, and it was too painful. The other thing I noticed, just from a very personal perspective, it was very difficult. Yom HaZikaron and Yom HaAtzmaut. None of the kids didn't feel like we did it properly. I didn't feel we did it properly. And somebody said to me something very wise. They said, "You need to create new rituals." Said, all the chagim and all the birthdays and all the things that you got into a pattern as a family doing, it's all fallen apart. And you have to reinvent those rituals that are going to make it feel like a family occasion. So I think that was a big eye-opener to me, and I think that's work in progress for the year ahead.
So as you can tell, Rabbi Dee is a little bit of a pushover, mild-mannered, gentle soul. And yet, this past year, still within the year, following the murder of his wife and his daughters, he was in Tel Aviv on Chol HaMoed Sukkot, that's the connection, Chol HaMoed Sukkot, and he was holding a lulav and esrog as part of a public tefillah. And you can actually watch it on video. This fellow who was significantly larger than Rabbi Dee charged into him, didn't knock him down, Baruch Hashem, but certainly staggering a little bit. This was the religious versus the anti-religious, which during Chol HaMoed Sukkot seemed very much to be what was going on in Israel. And then 2 days later was October 7th. Can you tell us what you experienced, what Israeli society was like, what happened to it, and what do you feel about that?
So I think what happened after our tragedy, and after the flag thing went around Israel, various people came to me and said, look, we want you to get involved in helping create achdut, unity amongst the Jewish people. And so I was engaged in many different little projects at the time and speaking to different groups and trying to get people together. And then on Yom Kippur, they generally had in Kikaz Dizengoff Square in Tel Aviv, they had a regular service there which was religious, non-religious together, and they would organize something with a mechitza. And this year, some agitators came along and they broke it up. They said you can't have mechitza, it's divisive, and worse than anything of all was the fact that the mayor of Tel Aviv came along and supported them and said they were right to break it up. And worse than that was that the Bagatz, the Supreme Court, came along and said that he was correct to support them breaking it up. So and therefore the mayor of Tel Aviv and the Supreme Court said that it's forbidden. If he wants to forbid segregated prayer in the streets of Tel Aviv, it's his right. It's the right of people of Tel Aviv to do so. So I was appalled. I think many people were appalled by it. But I said, this is against my human rights. I said, forget my religious rights. This is against my human rights. So I immediately went out and I made a mechitza with a sign written prayer service for freedom of religion in Hebrew and English, right? So tefillah, the chofesh dat, right? And we got some people to hold it up. We went to Kikar Dizengoff, and turned out you're only allowed to have 50 people without a permit from the police. Baruch Hashem, 50 people exactly turned up. I can't tell you. I mean, a lot of people came with me from a frat, and then a number of secular people came, and they said, because we publicized on the radio in the morning, people said they heard what we were doing, and they came especially to support us. I had people who said to me, this is the first time I've shaken a lulav in my life, but I came to support you, and it was beautiful. There was one person who came to upset it, to agitate at the beginning. And she went round and started sitting in the men's section, and she started screaming her voice off. And then she called her friends. And after about half an hour, another couple turned up, and by the end, there was about 5 or 6 of them. The police came along in the middle of the Amidah, and they took down the mechitza because they knew that nobody was going to, nobody could tackle them in the middle of that. But we continued the service, and it was actually pretty good. And then this guy came along. I discovered afterwards that he's actually a very nasty character. He's a Jew, but he defends Palestinian terrorists in court, and he sort of takes the side of terrorists. So he's a pretty unpleasant character. And he came along, and he nudged me out the way. My recollection was he nudged me out the way, but somebody caught a picture, and it looked from the picture that he's really sort of shoved me out the way, and I was really shocked. And it just caught at that particular moment. So that picture went viral, and the next morning, so the Friday before Simchat Torah, the headline sort of picture and also TV was this particular snap. It was also Bibi tweeted how terrible it is that they're doing this to Leo in Disco Square, and Ben Gurion got involved. Everybody said. In the meantime, I was interviewed in every TV station, and I had a different message. I said to them, look, we did this prayer service. Actually, we discovered this huge achdut out there, and we had people coming along and shaking the love for the first time. I said there were 5 agitators, the whole of Israel. They found 5 people who came. I said, and they said, well, how do you feel? I said, well, I was in a community in England which had 99% not Shomer Shabbat. They're lovely people, they were 100% Shomer, Chesed, whatever. But I had a bar mitzvah or bat mitzvah every week. And people would have their friends and cousins and family come, and they would be on their phones in the middle of the service, and people would be talking. I said, look, I'm used to people agitating, talking through myself. So the unique thing about this for me was people came from all over Israel in order to agitate my service. I said, I had my regulars that would they would disturb the service, but here was actually people coming specifically just as. So I tried to make a joke of it, but unfortunately, it was turned into slightly out of context. In any case, it quickly got forgotten.
October 7th came along, brought the country together in ways that I don't think anyone ever anticipated. Is the country still together?
Yes, I think it is. You're always going to see pictures of people who are not together, right? Because that's much more interesting news. Funnily enough, the day on Tish B'Av that I was asked to sit in this CD studio and talk about how I felt, they kept me waiting for half an hour in the waiting room. And they had a TV screen with Channel 13 news playing over and over again. And that day, must be maybe Tish B'Av the day before, they had one of these marches, 10,000 people through the Ayalon highway with flags. And there was one guy who jumped over the barrier and tackled the police, and the police tackled him down to the ground. And as I sat there for half an hour, they replayed this. I think it was live, this was the TV program. They replayed it 5 times, right? So they do in the news, they played the same clip 5 times. And I looked and I thought, Baruch Hashem. I thought, there's only one person who actually was tackling the police that day, right? 10,000 people walking peacefully, and one person tackled, and that's why they have to show me the same clip 5 times. So often that's what you see in the news, is the piece that they show you, they keep showing the same picture over and over again, because actually that's all they have. So I think that there's a lot of sheker in the news today. And in general, people are extremely positive about the war effort. Everybody feels we have to beat Hamas, and we have to beat Hezbollah. There's no choice. Right? We've got 100,000 people who are displaced. There's no other option. And Iran, who's gone, once all that's done, we can finish them off.
Mirz Hashem, from your mouth to the ears of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. I've spoken to Israelis who want to know how we're doing here in America. They say, in Israel it's safe, but we hear in New York it's not so safe. I don't know if they're your agitators or our agitators, but Baruch Hashem, we are blessed with many agitators here. What's your perspective as an Israeli on what's going on here in America? Do you think this is the end of the golden age of Jewry in America? Should we be
starting that paperwork to make Aliyah. What do you think?
All good questions. So let me tell you, I was invited to an emergency Aliyah meeting 2 weeks ago. I don't know if it was public, I think it was video, I don't know who was watching it, in Jerusalem. One speaker got up and he spoke to the video and he said, "You're all going to die. This is 1939 on stilts, and it's far worse than anything we've ever seen in the history of Jewish people." I think there are a couple of things that support that. One of which is that Nazi Germany had two distinct differences to what's going on now in America. Number one, they had a charismatic leader. And number two, it was limited to two geographies, to Germany and to Austria. Okay, this particular movement has no charismatic leaders.
You're talking about the United States?
Yeah, but President Biden, no. I'm talking about the Free Palestine movement. Has no charismatic leaders, and it is in every geography in the world. And it's a grassroots movement, and it's like wildfire. I mean, it's absolutely, so those are two reasons to be more worried about it. So I look at it differently, and I'm glad that you brought the topic up. I'll tell you a story. When Lucy and I went back to England for 6 years on Shlichut in 2008, 2009, so about 9 months after we arrived, Sunday morning, Lucy woke up and she said, "I had a dream." So I said, "What was your dream?" She said, "I dreamt that house prices in a flat went up faster than house prices in London, and the shekel got stronger against the pound, and we couldn't afford to buy a house in a flat when we moved back in a few years' time." So I looked at her, she knew nothing about finance and nothing about house prices. So I said, so what do you want me to do? She said, "We've got to sell a house in London, and we've got to buy a place in a flat." So I said, okay. So we sold the house.
Just like that.
February 2000.
Husbands, pay attention.
February 2010. I was a rabbi, so I was living in the shul house, and we were renting it out at the time. February 2010, I went off to a flat by myself. She had 5 kids under the age of 6, and I was there for 4 days. I looked at every house that was available. It was before iPhones, and therefore, I had to video the houses, and I had to send it back on the internet, from the hotel in the evening, which meant she didn't actually know which was which. And there was a bit of confusion, but in any case, she chose the one she thought she liked best, and we bought it. She didn't see it for 4 years, whatever. All I can say is that when I bought that house, I could have afforded 3 houses in the flat for the price of 1 house in London. Today, that same house is worth twice what that house in London is worth today. So, and that's what's happening. That continues to happen, as you're aware, in Israel in terms of property, and it's what's continuing to happen, generally speaking, in outside of Israel. The prices are basically going down because of inflation or because of whatever. Even they look they're higher, they're actually lower. And my call to you, if I can be that bold, is to say the following: if you think that 5% of your neighbors might say this is the opportunity to leave, right? It doesn't mean it matters if you believe this is the end of the world or not. But if you believe 5% of your neighbors might decide this is the time to leave, your house price could halve. If you think 10% of your neighbors in this neighborhood might decide this is the time to leave, your house price goes down by 75%, because that's the economics of house prices in a Jewish area. I heard that house prices are pretty high at the moment. That's a very good thing. If you were to sell your house now and buy something in a frat, or not a frat, in Israel, you could get a very decent property. If you do that in a year or two's time, I don't promise that will be the case. And I think that as this situation gets worse, if it gets worse, that situation happens faster. I also would like to say that I know in America you spend a lot of money on health insurance. How much do you spend on health insurance? $100,000.
Way too much.
It's incredible because in Israel, by the way, it's almost free. As is school fees, as is university fees, as is things that you pay a lot of money for here are basically free in Israel. But health insurance, you pay a fortune for health insurance, right? Why do you do that? Because if you think about it, the health insurance company makes money, which means you're paying probably more than it will cost you if you're just paying your own fees. But you're doing it because there's a 1 in 1,000 chance, 1 in 10,000 chance that, God forbid, you'll have something which would cost $1 million or $10 million to fix, right? So for that, you're prepared to spend $100,000, $200,000, whatever it is, on health insurance. I think that it would be wise to spend Israel insurance and to say, actually, probably more important than health insurance, to say, if there's a 1 in 1,000 chance, 1 in 100 chance, 1 in 10 chance that Jews will not be that welcome in America in the next year, 2 years, 5 years, it would be worth having a property, I think, having your foot on the ladder in Israel now. And that would be something to consider because if you don't do it now, then you're not sure. As my grandfather said to my father said to me, he said, you have to have a property in Israel. I remember when I was in private equity, my boss said to me, he said, there's one asset that if you don't have it, you are negative, right? You're short, and that's a house, right? Because you have to be in the housing market with something. And the Israeli housing market is shooting up because, number one, a lot of people are coming on Aliyah, but more importantly, there's no one building. There's no Arabs to build. There's no new housing. We desperately need new housing, and there's a huge demand. So I'm not guaranteeing. I just think that from a risk perspective, everybody would be wise to have a plan B. I say about Israel. Israel is terrible at plan A. Right? We saw what happened on 7th of October. There was no strategic planning. They do have strategic planning on how to get the soldiers out there and feed them for the first week or two. But they're fantastic at plan B. Right? So now we're in a war situation. Everybody knows exactly what to do. We're all, so plan B, and if plan B fails, plan C is fantastic. So I just think you'd be wise to have plan B. Every Jew should have plan B. We know the history of our people. It's odd that I'm saying this because of what I've been through and living in Israel after October the 7th, and you might think, who is he to tell us what might be dangerous? But as somebody reminded me, before the state of Israel, right, just 3 years before the state of Israel, 6 million of our people were killed in 6 years. 1 million people a year because we didn't have the state of Israel. Okay? And before that, we know that millions of people were killed in Poland, in Ukraine, in pogroms in the 19th century, and in Spain, in the Inquisition, and of course in Greece and Rome and Egypt. I mean, just every generation we've had the same thing. So if we go according to history, I think we would be wise to have a plan B.
Sounds like good advice. Should have listened 10 years ago. Sounds like good advice. It is now 4:05 in the morning for Rabbi Dee. So we'll open up the floor for just a few questions before we call it a night. Anybody have any questions?
How are your other children doing?
Thank you. Baruch Hashem, they're all very occupied. So my son started boarding school in September. So he's constantly busy with friends at school. Tali is at Midrashah, so she's living there as well. And my daughter Karen is doing national service, where she lives with kids from difficult homes, and she lives there during the week as well. So they're very busy. Baruch Hashem is surrounded by a lot of friends. The wonderful thing, without just talking about the scaremongering about America, I have to talk about the beauty of Israel. The youth in Israel are phenomenal. I'm sure the youth in America are phenomenal as well, but the opportunities for them are just exceptional in terms of the youth groups Everybody's engaged in youth groups and active. Then they go on to national service or to the army. They become real mentors. I mean, looking at the kids who are fighting in this war is just absolutely inspiring. I mean, Israel is the only country where this could happen today. It's the only country where people will say, put their hand up and say, I'm coming to fight. Right? We had volunteers go. You look at America, they say 70% of the Gen Z would not qualify for the army for mental or physical reasons. That's what they say. If you look at Britain, the culture is not one person would volunteer for the. In fact, I think it was 27% actually. In a survey would go to the army. In Europe, it's probably even less. Right? That is the state of the Western world today. The culture is very sort of complacent, and somehow in Israel, everybody heard the call and lifted their hand and said, "I'm coming." Before I went to the airport yesterday, I went to Tel Aviv to visit some of the soldiers who'd been injured, and there was one guy there, 23-year-old, actually turned out to be a nephew of a friend of mine from a frat. He lost two legs and an arm and fingers on his other hand, and he was in intensive care for 6 weeks. They gave him 35 liters of blood, which I think was the second highest. There was somebody else who said he had 37. His parents literally didn't think he was going to survive for 6 weeks. He was sitting there, absolutely calm and speaking to everyone, and just incredible, talking about how he'll get the prosthetics and he'll be able to walk, and how he'll be able to operate, and maybe he'll go and study law, and absolutely the most inspiring, just incredible, just unbelievable. And this is not abnormal. I mean, these people, there are more and more incredibly strong people. They talk about resilience in Israel. They call it Hosek. But it's not resilience. It's actually becoming stronger from experience. These people are becoming, I turned to him and I said, look, I said, you're a hero. I said, now you're going to have to, this is going to redefine your life, because now, wherever you go, you're going to be the hero, right? And it's humbling to see these people. But we, this is what's happening in Israel. Is where life is real, where people are rising to the challenge, and the other thing is we need you. We need you. I hear a lot of Israelis come back, non-religious Israelis, and they always come back from an experience of spending Shabbat here or in Teaneck or wherever, Florida, and they always say, if we had a community like Great Neck or like Teaneck or whatever, we would go to shul, but we don't have anything like it in Israel. We need this type of community. We need you to take your rabbi and your assistant rabbi and your chazan and to pick up and to sell this beautiful business. To take the $10 million or whatever you get for this plot of land, go and buy a piece of land in Beit Shemesh or wherever it is, right? A beautiful countryside, build this on homes and relocate, because that's how.
Sounds like a great plan. Okay, thank you all very much for coming. Just a reminder, we will daven Mariv back in the youth center at the conclusion of the program. Rabbi Dee needs to daven Mariv. He didn't yet have an opportunity to daven Mariv, so he'll daven with us. And if you want to hang around for a few moments, he'll be able to answer some questions then. Would you do me a favor and please join me in thanking Rabbi Dee for being here with us.